Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's panel. Our topic today is capacity building, taking your nonprofit to the next level, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But as usual, before we jump in and get started, I do have a few quick logistics to cover. NXUnite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, and the NXUnite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video on NXUnite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with experts such as the lovely folks here with me today. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. So at any time during the panel, please feel free to start submitting your questions either directly in the chat or in the questions tab. And then we're going to dedicate the second half of this panel to answering as many as we possibly can. But as I mentioned, you can get them in now. The earlier you get them in, the more likely we will be able to get through more questions in that second half. At any point, if you're having any technical difficulties or have any logistics questions, please reach out via the chat. My colleague, Malou, is under the Team NXUnite username and will do her best to assist. So give a little holler in the chat, let us know what's happening, and we'll figure out how to get you back on and enjoying the session as quickly as possible. I did also want to share that this panel session is being recorded. So if you get to the end and the insight you heard was just so fantastic that you need to hear it a second time right away, that's wonderful news. It's going to automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session. So give it a few minutes after we wrap up and that email will be there with the access to the recording. It will also continue to be accessible on the NXUnite website in the on-demand panels section. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, I can't believe they missed it, that session was perfect for them, please feel free to share that same registration page that you use to sign up and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, finally, before I introduce today's panelists, I do want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you are joining us live and have let us know in the chat where you're calling in from, or you're watching the recording. I really appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to join us and talk through this fun topic. And I hope that if you are joining us live, you will submit those questions so we can bring the conversation in a direction that is relevant to you, your team, and your work. All right, time to finally introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Chris Miano, who is the founder of Memory Fox and an Army veteran with 2 tours overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. During his time in the Army, he learned about the tremendous power of storytelling to connect with people across many cultures and socioeconomic backgrounds. After returning home to Buffalo, New York, he went back to school to achieve a master's in business administration from the University at Buffalo with a focus on finance and entrepreneurship. It was there that he turned his passion for storytelling into a software platform that helps nonprofits share their story by elevating the grassroots stories of their community. So glad you could be here with us today, Chris.
Thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here with all the panelists.
Also here with us today is Monique Parker, who is the founder of Little Bit of Good, a capacity building accelerator program and foundation serving Black-led nonprofits in Texas. Little Bit of Good strives to increase awareness and action around the funding and resource inequalities in the nonprofit sector, more specifically experienced within the Black population. Its mission is to equip and support Black nonprofit leaders with the strategy, resources, and capital necessary to create sustainable and scalable impact within their communities through capacity building initiatives. So glad you could be here, Monique.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm super excited for today's conversation.
As am I. Here with us today is Sherry Quam Taylor, who is the founder and president at Quam Taylor LLC. She works with growth minded nonprofit CEOs who are scaling their organizations but still need larger amounts of general operating support to accomplish their strategic plans. The high-performing leaders Sherry works with need more unrestricted revenue from investment-level donors. As a result of learning her methodology, Sherry's clients regularly add 7 figures of GenOps revenue to their bottom line by learning how to attract investment-level donors that want to fund their network. Glad to have you on another panel, Sherry.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Finally, here with us today is Stephanie King, who is a senior Salesforce consultant at Redpath Consulting Group. She bridges the gap between the tech nerds and the rest of us. She has spent a decade working as a Salesforce consultant, helping nonprofits leverage cloud technology to support their mission. Stephanie is a 7-time certified senior Salesforce consultant on the nonprofit practice team at Redpath Consulting Group. With a background in language, art, and education, she has come to appreciate the power of technology to empower nonprofits to create more good in the world. Glad to have you, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. All right, it is finally time for us to start to hear from our panelists. And Chris, I'm going to have you start us off with the first question. How would you define capacity building?
Yeah, thank you. Like the Council Foundations has done a lot of work on this, and they really focus on the concept of the growth and sustainability of a nonprofit organization. And they do a great job, but I think of it kind of on simpler terms. For me, I think of it in terms of leveling up, not just temporarily, but with permanence. Before I had 2 kids, I was a little bit of a video game nerd, so you'll have to forgive the comparison. But it's not like a mushroom in Mario Brothers where you get a temporary boost and you become something stronger. It's more about uplifting organizations so they reach a new and improved normal that is sort of baked into the fabric of the organization. Whereas a lot of things are just like, hey, we're going to give you a temporary thing, a boost. But really what it should be about is permanence and uplifting an organization so that they can sustainably continue in perpetuity. That's the way that I think about it.
Thank you so much, Chris. The chat loves your Mario reference, so no need to apologize for that. Monique, I'm going to bring this same question over to you. How do you define capacity building, and what does it mean to you in your work?
Yeah, very similar answer to Chris in terms of just very simple, anything, any tactic, any strategy that allows an organization to scale, to be more sustainable, and be able to build and grow, I define as capacity. So a big umbrella term for a lot of different things.
Wonderful. Sherry, over to you. Anything you want to add in terms of capacity building before we get into this bigger conversation?
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that I think that sometimes it comes up in a conversation as, those are those extra things we would do if we got more funding, or it's that, we'll do it someday when we get a grant for that work. Where tying back to what both Chris and Monique said, these are things from whether it's a programmatic perspective, in general admin or fundraising perspective that are critical to us running and scaling our organizations. And so I'm always challenging people to see them as not that extra, not that like, oh, if we get enough money this year, we'll do those things. Because often, sometimes not investing in those things is actually the thing that's causing the organization not to grow. So that would just be the only thing I would add to the context.
Thank you, Sherry. And over to you, Stephanie. Anything you want to add to capacity building and our definition today?
Yeah, as we've heard, capacity building is just the ability to do more. And Sherry alluded to this. I just wanted to land on something she alluded to a little bit, is that capacity building for nonprofits is really interesting because there's the 2 big sides. There's the fundraising side, looking at how we can cultivate, nurture, grow our donor base, both increasing the number of people involved in contributing, as well as finding ways to increase the size and frequency of giving from your existing donor base. And then there's the program side, really what the nonprofit is all about. And on that side, capacity building means being able to deliver more to your mission, which is so exciting. Whatever that mission is, serve more people, host more events, deliver more services, and being able to grow that capacity, like Chris said, in a way that's sustainable without people getting burned out, and overwhelmed by everything they have to do, right? It has to be fun. It has to be sustainable. And for nonprofits, of course, these two sides go completely hand in hand. So I think when we're talking about capacity building, it's both of these together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephanie. All right, we are off to a great start, and I'm excited to continue the conversation. But very quickly, I want to let our audience know that we have had a poll go live where we've asked you all, does your nonprofit currently dedicate time specifically to capacity building? I see some of you have already found it, but if you haven't found it yet and you want to fill it out, it is there. It'll give us just a little bit more of an idea of where you're coming into this conversation at. So submit those questions in the chat, but also if you want to let us know kind of where you are, that poll is a great way to do so. All right, Sherry, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. What are some of the common challenges faced by nonprofit organizations when it comes to capacity building, and how do you suggest we overcome them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one common one I see is actually when it comes to budgeting. So I help organizations, raise more general operating revenue, but oftentimes organizations aren't raising enough general operating revenue that could go back into capacity building, because there's this fear of even putting it in the budget in the first place. Well, we can't put that one thing in the budget because how would we get that money? We don't know if we have that pledged or secured. And so a place I always start is really that mindset of if we need it to sustain, grow, make our organizations more financially secure, we need to not see oftentimes capacity building as that extra thing, or we'll put it in the stretch budget, but if we don't get it, it's okay. We need it to grow the organization. We need it to be next level, to do whether it's programmatic or operationally or fundraising. And so I'm always pulling back the train to say, are we raising to the right number in the first place? Typically, I'm coming from a fundraising context, but we're not going to hit the number, which includes the capacity building work, if we're not having an honest conversation about the true financial need of the organization. So much of growing our organizations really comes back to budgeting and really understanding that level of investment that has to be made in an organization to spend money, to raise more money, or to raise our programs, or to grow in whatever way our organizations want to.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Stephanie, over to you. Any common challenges you've seen nonprofits face when it comes to capacity building, and any suggestions on overcoming these challenges?
Yeah, so the way I get involved in this is often from the angle of technology and data. So one of the challenges that I'm frequently involved with is the issue of information silos in an organization. Fundraising information is tracked here, programming information is in a different system or spreadsheets over there. Committees and event attendance are just tracked by like whatever tool that person wants to use, who runs it. And then all the emails over here in MailChimp or whatever. So this common issue limits capacity in so many ways, both from kind of the macro level and micro level. From an organizational level, the big patterns are hidden from view. Things like annual reports, mailing list, grant applications might take literal weeks and weeks of work to pull together information that's spread out all over the place and in different formats, and just really hard to synthesize and use for really important things that you have to do, right? Which obviously limits capacity. And then on a micro level, you're limited in your capacity to be effective because you can't just look at a donor or a potential big donor and understand who they are to you. What is their total lifetime giving or their last gift date? Did they come to the most recent event? Are they subscribed to your email list? Have they used any of your services as a nonprofit? So all these clues would help you use your energy effectively and wisely when you're cultivating donors. But if it takes too much energy to find all that information, you just won't do it. You'll just make do. You'll just do the thing. And ultimately, then you remain more limited in your capacity.
Thank you, Stephanie. Chris, over to you. Thoughts on common challenges and how to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, coming from the Army, I sort of see everything as like a leadership challenge, right? And when you're building capacity, in order for it to be permanent, it requires organizational buy-in. And that's the job of leaders. Great leaders engage their staff and volunteers with a full heart and an open mind, listen to those voices, and come up with a unified plan of action. Right? They start at the bottom. If it's not, if capacity building is not bottom up, it won't stick and it won't stay. I'm sorry. Yeah. If it's top down, I mean, you guys have experienced it. I'm sure you need to spend that time training and educating everyone, including volunteers, maybe especially volunteers, because they sort of get boxed out sometimes. And once everybody understands sort of how it benefits them and how it's going to grow the organization, I think you'll see a lot more buy-in. But without that buy-in, I think, you've all probably seen this before. These things don't stick because leaders are too afraid to engage and have difficult conversations and maybe receive pushback, right? You have to let your organization shape that capacity building project rather than you just telling them, hey, this is what we're going to do. That's something that I've seen work.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. All right, Monique, I think you know what question is coming your way. Any common challenges you've seen with capacity building? Any advice for overcoming them?
Yeah, and I think every time I speak, I come with a more Black or BIPOC focused lens because that's the community that I specifically support. I think that we can go into a much longer conversation about funding and restricted funding versus not, and how that directly impacts capacity and capacity building opportunities for organizations. So if there are any funders or grant organizations on the call, this is definitely your opportunity to support capacity building by thinking about more unrestricted grant opportunities and more collaboration and partnership with the organizations you're granting to. I think with a lot of nonprofit organizations, like a lot of things mentioned are kind of line items or more luxuries when we think about capacity building. And I think kind of scaling back a bit and specific to grassroots organizations or orgs that have, under $1 million budget, it's really identifying where your capacity needs are, because it's not always a specific line item. It can be, like you mentioned, Chris, if you need to spend more time, speaking to and educating your staff and volunteers, maybe you don't have the capacity to have that conversation. So you're identifying that a capacity need is someone who can come in and handle that conversation for you. So really taking a step back to identify what your core needs are, and then seeing everything as a potential capacity build, from somebody to come sweep the floor to somebody writing the grants. And then also a way to build capacity without funding, if you can recognize those certain things and then start to build, committees, volunteers, supporters that can come fill those capacity gaps.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Monique. Very quickly, I want to go back to that poll and just see where we fell with all the numbers. So again, we asked you all, does your nonprofit currently dedicate time specifically to capacity building? 57% of you said no, but we have considered it. 29% of you said yes, we prioritize capacity building efforts. 14% said not sure or I don't know, and 0% of you said no, but we plan to in the future. So it seems like we're coming kind of from all different places today. So thank you all for filling out that poll. Stephanie, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. How can nonprofits measure the success of their capacity building efforts, and what metrics should they be tracking?
Yeah, so how to measure success and what metrics to track. I am going to focus my attention on the first half of the question, which is how you will track the success of your capacity building efforts. I think that thinking about what metrics to track is exciting and fun, and kind of the easy part. If you don't have a system that can measure your work effectively, then that question of what to track is just a moot point. So I think looking at your systems and simply asking, do you have a system that can answer your most important questions? Can you access those answers on demand in real time when you need them? Or are you waiting for that once a year laborious reporting project to even find out how you're doing? It is the 21st century and we have these tools that can do these things. So investing in the right tool to support your organization is just that foundation layer of building capacity.
Thank you, Stephanie. Sherry, over to you. Any thoughts on measuring success of our efforts and if there are particular metrics we should track?
Sure. So, I'm coming to you from a revenue standpoint and a fundraising standpoint. So obviously, organizations coming to me because they want to build capacity in usually their major gifts program or their unrestricted revenue. The one thing I would say here, and I hear a lot from my clients, years ago, I would wait to do case studies or video testimonials to like a year or two out, because I was like, I gotta, like, the gift work I do is long-term gift work. So I'm like, I gotta wait till they have the results. But I started doing case study videos earlier because I was hearing my clients talk about how they were measuring success with, I guess I'll say like softer metrics, like things like, well, now I can breathe, or wow, I'm not working 80 hours a week, or I actually know what to do when I go in and talk to a donor, where before I was completely shooting at the hip. And so I'm all about tracking the metrics and having the spreadsheets and running the reports and all of that. That's speaking my language. But I'd also say that when I see my teams say things like, our staff is healthier because 6 months ago 2 people quit because we're expecting them to do too much, and it's allowed us to actually have some objectivity and align our hours with dollars, and just make better health decisions, I guess, for the employees and the company. I think those are super important metrics, and frankly allow us then to do things like raise more money or grow our programs and that sort of thing. So I've really been trying to tune into what are those feelings now that my clients have, or things that maybe aren't on a spreadsheet, but gosh, it's life-changing.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Monique, over to you. Any thoughts on measuring success of our capacity efforts and what metrics we should be tracking?
Yeah, not a lot to add to these ladies' answers outside of obviously it really just depends on what type of capacity metric you're looking at and how to measure its success. I'm a big fan of adding numerical value to ours. As Sherry mentioned, there's a lot of organizations now where, let's say they invest in a software or a technology, and then they're able to say, after working with this software for 6 months, we save the equivalent of $3,500 in staff time or something like that. I think that that's a good potential metric that you can use and also use when talking to your funders. But for some of those more qualitative metrics, I do think in the way that you storytell about your organization and your mission and some of the things that you're doing internally, that's when you can really kick up and talk about the difference with X capacity effort that is not necessarily focused on a hard metric. And I think that's with a lot of capacity building things or things that fall under capacity. It's not necessarily going to be like a one-to-one input output. So also just not putting a lot of pressure on yourself to have a metric for every single thing.
Thank you, Monique. All right, Chris, any final thoughts on measuring success and any metrics we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think Monique nailed it. It's like the idea. I think people can get overwhelmed if you have too many metrics that you're tracking, right? And that's sort of obvious. I'm stating the obvious there. Having a North Star metric for a capacity building project that's like, hey, we're doing this and it is going to impact this key performance indicator, more online donations, more social media followers, but attaching it to something, because then it gives everybody a visualization, helps you get buy-in. But maybe the most important thing is when you come up with that metric that you want to track, again, it needs to be a bottom-up metric. It can't be the executive director saying, this is what we're going to track. You all run businesses, right? I mean, the idea is you want that, you need that buy-in. And if it comes more organically, well, now you have a metric that everybody can sort of follow. And maybe this is a topic for another day, but we're really kind of seeing a shift to more trust-based giving when it comes to capacity building, where, and Monique, you kind of touched on this, where stories are the centerpiece of the demonstration of proof of impact, not just numbers. And this benefits grassroots organizations who really don't have sophisticated data collection because they're busy delivering the mission, right? Like if we're evaluating organizations by their ability to track their impact, what are we doing here? So that's something that we're pretty passionate about. And I'm pretty passionate about, is like, making stories and storytelling the centerpiece to it when possible, and foundations giving nonprofits the space to make stories a big part of how they convey their impact.
Thank you so much, Chris. All right, I have 2 more questions for each of our panelists before I'm officially opening this up to the audience. I know a few questions have already come in via the chat, but feel free to keep sending them in. Again, the more we get, the more we can get through. Monique, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. In what ways can technology and data analysis be leveraged to build capacity within nonprofit organizations?
My favorite topic is technology and data. So I think that especially now, today, there are so many different platforms and technologies that you can implement that save time. And I think that that's primarily how I look at capacity these days. So when it comes to, your data tracking and measurement, and this also ties to kind of stepping back to evaluate where your capacity needs are. But if you're saying like, hey, we're spending so many hours on collecting surveys and data and then, getting this into an impact story. Let's look at that and say like, okay, are there existing technologies out there that can shorten this process? And 9 times out of 10, there are. And I think that goes into Elizabeth's question around, does capacity need to be like its own standalone line item, or is it built into your different program funding? I think it depends on where you're using those certain things. If you are, again, with the data example, if you are bringing in a technology that's going to help with your data collection and metrics, then maybe we put that in your operational budget. But if it is specific to a program and not your overall organization data collection, go ahead and put it under the program so funders can specifically fund that program. And now that data, technology, not necessarily listed in your operational budget, so we have a little flex there. I also think certain things like fundraise.ai, if you haven't been on it yet, it's freaking amazing. It'll just write everything for you, grants, emails, all the things. And so utilizing that, I think this sector overall tends to be a bit slower to adopting certain things. Go with technology. We need to be moving fast in order to solve these crazy world issues. And then also Prozl.ai. If y'all have never heard of that, any of you that are in consulting or respond to a lot of RFPs, that's been a super fantastic platform to just go and look into open RFPs. But yeah, just starting to look into all these things that people are out here building and then figuring out how you can utilize them, and then going to tell them that you're a nonprofit so you can get it for free.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Monique. Chris, I'm going to bring this question over to you. In what ways can tech and data analysis support our capacity building efforts?
Yeah, and I love that Monique brought up AI, because I think on like a broader level, the fact that an AI can write a grant proposal, like an effective one, tells you all you need to know about like the state of grant making, where it's like, what are we really doing here if computers can just do it? Like, we should be rethinking this stuff to make it more humanistic, more natural, and more accessible to smaller organizations. But on a broader level, I mean, humans are notoriously terrible at conceptualizing data and impact numbers in the first place. So you need video and storytelling to sort of give that context and perspective. And like, I'm a huge data nerd, definitely don't get me wrong on that. But I kind of mentioned this earlier, like, if the ability to collect and leverage data is a prerequisite for a grant, you're just boxing out the most important organizations who are actually doing the real messy work in communities where it's not simple and it's not easy to collect data. And so we're just boxing those people out if we make data the centerpiece. And like I said, I'm a big data nerd. But and we also live in this crazy attention economy right now, and it's never been harder for nonprofits to be able to stand out and win volunteers and donor dollars. And obviously technology can help leverage that. That's what we do, right? Is we have a storytelling platform that helps people do that. But it's about leveling the playing field, because we may not perceive this, but a nonprofit is competing against, Pepsi. They're competing against the Kardashians. They're competing on social media every day for those eyeballs. And technology is really the only way to kind of catch them up and level that playing field. And if foundations are spending money, investing in their community and leveling that playing field, well, now you have new capacities, and now these organizations can grow in perpetuity. But if they're constantly trying to swim upstream, they'll never get to where they need to be, because it's just so competitive nowadays. So that's something that I'm just very passionate about. So I'm glad you asked it.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great to hear from you on that topic. Stephanie, over to you. In what ways can tech and data analysis be leveraged to build capacity?
Yeah, I forget exactly how Monique started. I think she said, "I love data," or something like that. And I was like, yes, me too. So there really are so many ways. I get excited about data. Redpath, where I work, we are a technology company focused on helping nonprofit organizations get that 360-degree view of their constituents and their data, and empower them to use that data effectively. So I've just got like a couple hot takes of like what you can do with that data if you need some sparks for your imagination. So need to be able to check out who are your top donors. What was the last time you connected with them? Do you need to reach out to keep those relationships warm? What grants or major gifts are in your pipeline? Do you even know? Does everybody know? What stage are they at, and what do you need to do next to get them to close those deals? How many people do you serve, and what do they look like, and what are the outcomes of your work? Having those numbers in hand in real time allows you to apply for grants. That's the world we live in, and win them and have meaningful conversations with other kinds of big donors about your impact and influence them. I have a nerdy example, but I think a good example of how data tools can help you find the gaps and errors in your data. Where have you made mistakes in data entry or systems integration that might be throwing things off? Without good technology tools, those kinds of problems can fly under the radar for so long and become so big before you even know they exist, and then they are so big and they do cause big problems. So having the right tools in place to like see things that are really happening is really important. So for me, like this stuff is my bread and butter. This is what I do, and these are just 4 examples. But in any org that I'm working with, creating the ability to see these things without having to, I think it was Chris who commented about, someone had a good comment about how like a lot of metrics can be overwhelming. Like it isn't just about like how many things can we track just for the sake of it. But bringing those things together so that you can see them in one place. And then as individual contributors, you know where your focus is. Like this is the one that's really meaningful to me. And I can also refer to other metrics and reports and things to understand how the organization is doing, and having those things available, just increasing that empowerment for people to do more because they have access to the tools to see what's going on.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. All right, Sherry, anything you want to add to this conversation on tech and data analysis for capacity building?
I think the data experts have this one covered.
All right, that sounds good. In that case, I'll move on to my final question before I open it up to the audience. Again, keep submitting those questions. I've seen some great ones come in. And Sherry, I'm actually just going to stick with you then for this next one. How can our nonprofits ensure that their capacity building efforts align with their organizational goals and mission?
Yeah. So most people come to me, or a lot of people, I should say, because they've got a strategic plan that is really visionary and they're super excited about it, but they're really struggling to fund it. And they're struggling to secure enough unrestricted revenue to build or to invest in that general operating and capacity building. And so, it probably ties back to where I started. And sometimes people are like, why do you always talk about budgeting? But there really is such a need for us to really own the financial needs of our organization. I have a client who, they were always going back to this one funder who would do a 2-year gift of $200,000. I've been working with them, and they've recently moved that gift to $700,000 a year versus $200,000 a year. And it's so simple how they did it, and so practical. And it ties to this. And they said to me, we stopped asking for what we thought they would fund, and we presented what we needed, and truly what we needed, and moved that gift to a general operating gift for capacity. And so sometimes we're afraid to go sit at the table and ask for that, or we're afraid to put that in the budget and have that honest conversation. And funders will say, oh my gosh, of course, but we didn't know you needed that. And I see that all the time. And so it really is an honest conversation, and to remove the fear from the table when you are doing strategic planning, when you are aligning your budgets to your strategic plan. It's really a critical step that a lot of people kind of blush over.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Sherry. Monique, over to you. How can we ensure our capacity building aligns with our organizational goals and mission?
I talk about alignment a lot, and I think just in general, the different partners and collaborators that you're working with, if they truly are mission aligned, then it's never, a really hard ask in getting them to understand why you need what you need. And so always kind of looking at your list of funders and thinking about, are we in partnership with this person because they're a donor, or are we in partnership with this person or this organization because they're mission aligned? And I think once you really hit that like mission alignment point, it becomes much easier to say, hey, you get what we're doing. Here are the different things that we need. Here's how you can support us. I also fully agreed with, not being afraid to sit at that table and ask for what you need. My favorite conversation is to sit with philanthropists and people in the funding sector and talk to them about how they can do things differently. But also just a conversation around earned or generated revenue for nonprofit organizations, because I think that there's also an opportunity for us to start looking at our business more like a business, and adding that into the strategy is something that could potentially support capacity. What low liftings can we do to generate revenue, and is there an opportunity for that to fill, a potential gap? But lots of conversations that we could have.
We'll just need to have a part 2 and a part 3 to this session. That's what I'm hearing. Thank you so much, Monique. Chris, over to you. Any thoughts on making sure our capacity building aligns with our mission and goals?
Yeah, and sometimes, major gifts will come in and they'll be linked to some sort of new program that a donor wants to see, or a new pillar. And those are a lot of times under the guise of capacity building, right? They'll call it that. But it's not linked to your mission, then it's not capacity building. It's something different, and it could be a good thing. Could be a good thing to do. But we have to be careful about the language that we use, because language has power, right? And if somebody's just trying to get some new program going, it could be a distraction from your mission, despite what they call it capacity building. But again, what is that about? It doesn't work when it's a top-down initiative. It won't get the buy-in from the volunteers, from the people actually executing the mission. And so, you're just handing them a temporary Mario mushroom, instead of actually something that will actually have sustainable change within the organization. So block out all those things that are not mission sensitive, and I think you'll really benefit from that.
Thank you, Chris. All right, Stephanie, anything you want to add in terms of how we can make sure our capacity building aligns with mission?
Yeah, I first just want to say, Chris, you have reiterated this idea about bottom up thinking like so many times now, and I love it, because at repetition
so
number
crucial.
5, I need to think about this more.
People don't think about it enough, right? Because they think they have to,
Yeah.
they're in charge and they have to make the decisions, and that's their responsibility. But if you engage the people who are actually executing the mission, you get it.
I think that's really right. So my lens through my role is technology consultant. So I think about capacity building through that technology lens. That's my job. But it is, and I see this and I counsel people in this line of thinking, that technology doesn't define your strategy. So if you can first clearly articulate your mission and your goals, and I want to add your processes to that list, being able to articulate your processes that support your mission and goals. From there, then you're in a good position to find and implement tools, whether they be technology tools or other kinds of tooling that allow you to build capacity. There's a lot of really cool tools out there. There's a lot of shiny lights and bells and whistles. But again, don't let the tools and don't let the shiny lights define your processes or shape your goals. Get alignment around the goals and the mission as an organization so that you can be sure as you're building capacity and as you're tooling up that you're building towards the right things.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. We are officially moving over to our audience questions. And Stephanie, I'm actually going to stick with you for this first one. We had a question come in asking, can you give a more concise example of measuring capacity building? Specifically, I know my capacity needs, but not how to convey the measurement for future success on a new project.
Gosh, so you can look at it through the fundraising lens or through the program lens. Either way, I think you can look at what you're measuring in year over year or time period over time period kinds of building. So just, are we raising more money? What lenses can you look at that through? What does organizational giving look like? What does individual giving look like? And is that growing? Same thing with measuring program, whether it's number of people that you're able to serve or there's a lot of things that you can go into, but just measuring progress over time. So it does require, sometimes starting can feel like, oh, we haven't been measuring this before, so like this isn't fun yet. But so picking a couple of things and starting now, I guess is sometimes what it looks like. But then you can start measuring that progress over time. Start with month over month, and then build towards what you're looking to measure and grow.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm not going to have every panelist answer every question just because we did have a number of ones come in, but does anyone want to jump in on this and add to it? Otherwise, we'll keep moving. All right. In that case, a question for you, Monique. Someone has a follow-up to you bringing up AI. They say they have not used AI yet, but they're interested. What are your thoughts on how AI writes grant proposals without all proposals being the same, plagiarized, or canned?
I mean, you definitely have to go in and, edit it. The more you use a lot of these platforms, the more they become more familiar with your voice and tone and things like that. And it's getting kind of creepy. I typically use it as kind of a starting point, almost like a template. And then I'll go back into, previous grants that we've written or kind of, our document where we keep all the grant answers and then kind of plug things in where it makes sense. So I think it's a great kind of starting point. I wouldn't suggest just straight taking whatever the platform gives you and plugging that in, but just to get those answers going, it's a super big help. Also, just for like proactive email outreach, if you're working with a certain CRM and like want to set up a certain process or whatever for the emails, it's really nice for writing emails and just like very simply dumping those in there. So you just have to test it, and there's so many different platforms. I just recommend finding the one that works for you. I've heard Bard, B-A-R-D, is another really good platform. It's a little bit more advanced than ChatGPT, so recommend trying that one too.
Thank you so much, Monique. Stephanie, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I don't have any experience with some of these fundraising specific platforms, but just a funny anecdote related to this platform. If you haven't tried any of the AI tools, like it's worth just trying. Relating to this event, we were having an internal planning session and we had an opportunity as panelists to send in questions that we like maybe wanted to see in the panel or try to influence what kind of questions we might talk about today, right? It was a great experience. But when you're just like trying to like, like my brain is stuck, like what? It was a little small meeting internally. And I just went to ChatGPT and said, good panelist questions for why nonprofits should be interested in Salesforce, something like that, right? I don't remember exactly, but that's all I said. And that thing gave me back 20 like really pretty good panelist questions that I would love to answer. And then I don't think we used any of them like directly, but we were unblocked and we had just like content and ideas and like, yeah, that's a good direction. That's a good direction. So it's just a funny story relating to this, but if you haven't tried any of those tools, to just really jump in there with any old thing and you'll start to get a sense of everyday type tasks that you might be able to skill up at. Yeah.
There's some actual practical things. So our marketing direction taught me that you can be like, give me 10 Instagram post ideas for the month, and it'll give you 10. And then you say, for number 2, can you write the post, the actual post itself, and it did it. And it did a great job. So there's a lot of things that you can do with that. It's really amazing.
Absolutely. I think it is that writer's block that is super helpful when you have that blank document and don't know where to start. That first few ideas. Fantastic. Anyone else want to jump in here? All right, Sherry, question for you from our audience. I'm actually going to combine it with the one that came in with registration as well. We've asked for how to handle leadership if they're not necessarily on board. Question in the audience was particularly if leadership is hesitant to adopt tech solutions, but I know we had one in registration in general, just if a leader is worried about kind of distracting with capacity building. Any guidance or insights?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like sometimes when I get hesitation, and I'll tie it back to technology, especially about fundraising, sometimes I find that the hesitation is more rooted in what we think. In my case, fundraising is like, you're not going to make me do that, are you? It's like, well, hold on, wait, what if I presented it as from a totally different angle? My coach said to me, like, people always say to her, I hate sales. I don't want to be a salesman. She's like, yeah, but I think you hate what you think sales is. But actually, if you could do it where you're authentic and it's really just, kind of bringing the best version of you to the table, I don't think you would hate it as much. So I guess if it was a technology thing, I mean, I really try to, what do they say? Ask 7 whys and get to the bottom of it. What really is the issue? Does it go back to we're worried the staff doesn't have the ability to implement something that would be really, technologically complex, or is it, I don't know. Are they worried themselves they're going to have to be pulled into problem solving when they get stuck? And so, to me, I say if it actually, let's pull it all the way back to the strategic plan, the strategic vision. If this is a day-to-day thing that is going to help the staff be more efficient and effective and frankly get the results we want to get, why are we questioning it, is what I would ask.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Anyone else want to jump in terms of handling leadership concerns, either with technology or capacity building as a whole? Chris?
I mean, I always think everything is about empathy and listening. And Sherry, you touched on that, is get to the root of what their concern is. Maybe they have a valid concern. Maybe you're the one who's wrong. I mean, that could be an outcome, is like maybe you're misguided. But having that empathy to sit down with them and listen, focus on listening, not telling them the answer, but listening to their concerns and maybe asking leading questions that are like, well, do you think that it would impact this? Do you think? And then you can start to kind of tease them towards the direction that you want them to go, but using listening as a method rather than talking at them.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Anyone else want to jump in here? All right. In that case, Chris, I actually have another question for you, so I'll stick with you. Someone asked that you mentioned attention economy and the idea that attention is a scarce commodity these days. How can we leverage capacity building to help with this?
Yeah. I mean, think about the capacities that are underneath in the triangle of, the attention economy is where your prospective donors live, or even your returning donors or your volunteers live. And so what are the foundations of that? And so I'm going to talk myself in a circle here. But what was the question again? Sorry, sometimes I get so excited.
That's okay. We're saying, how can you leverage capacity building to help?
Oh, yeah, right. And so when you're having these conversations with the foundations that support you, and they're looking to do, like they're out there buying software for nonprofits to help foot the bill, at least for a year, right? And so have an idea of where you fit into that attention economy and be able to articulate it and say, hey, look, we're having a hard time standing out when it comes to attracting volunteers. We think that video stories from our volunteers would be something that's very powerful that we could share on Instagram and show people how much of a fun place this is. And we have a great mission and things like that. And if you can tie it to in that way, a lot of foundations are really, really investing in capacity building in those types and providing people, software that actually helps them.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Unfortunately, I have to have us. Oh, Stephanie, did you want to jump in? I have a moment if you want.
Sure, sorry. Yeah, I was just thinking about that attention economy concept, and how with your capacity building, like that the important thing is making sure you're sending the right message to the right people. And if you don't have the system that is going to support you in doing that, right? We know that overcoming that challenge of the attention economy isn't just to send more email to everybody every day, right? That's just the fastest way to get turned off, and you don't get anyone's attention, right? But if you're same thing really kind of goes if you're sending a fundraising message to a big donor who just gave you a big check last week. That might not be the best look, or just things like that. If you're not sending the right message to the right people at the right time, and you don't have the ability to do that, right? So making sure that the messages that you're presenting based on the data that you're able to collect in a easy, hopefully way, that you're getting the right message out at the right time. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. All right, I do have to have us start wrapping up just so we make sure we end on time. If you have any lingering questions, I know we didn't get through all the questions that were submitted with registration, please let us know. There is a poll that's just gone live where we've asked if there's a particular panelist you're hoping to hear from because you have some lingering question for them. Fill out that poll and we'll make sure they know to reach out to you. But I do have one final question for the group. So we hear from each panelist one final time. I'm going to admit it's a pretty big and broad question to end with, but it's my favorite way to end panels. And Stephanie, I'm actually going to have you start us off with this. What do you see as the future for nonprofits, and how can we get ahead today?
So it can be uncomfortable to say it because a lot of people who work in the nonprofit sector did not get there because of their passion for IT. But I do believe that engaging with technology tools is going to be really key, both for internal capacity building and in terms of the public-facing elements of your organization. Younger generations coming up now that are going to be the future of your organization, they are going to expect to be able to give electronically, easily, and to be able to manage their own giving without having to call in. They will not want to call in about anything. So there needs to be good forms that integrate with your database, or community portals that allow them to log in and interact with your organization in that way. Online interactions will need to be mobile ready. And you might still be figuring out how to accept donations of stock, right? That can be like a challenge or a weird thing, but brace yourself because somebody's going to want to donate using Bitcoin if that hasn't happened already, right? So these technology things are going to keep coming. Some of you listening in today might already be like really coming along on that technology journey. You might have a good database and integrated systems. And some of you might, on the other hand, be sitting there with Google Forms and spreadsheets and thinking this is totally overwhelming, right? That's not my intent. I think whatever stage you're at, there's always that next hill to climb with technology because it changes so fast. So I think the nonprofits who are still around in 10 years and growing the way they want to are the ones that are keeping technology tools in view, at least as you consider how to grow forward.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Sherry, over to you. Thoughts on the future for nonprofits and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, I always answer this question a little bit different, and maybe from the angle of let's be practical. And what I mean is I find that oftentimes it's like the next big thing, or we're often chasing the shiny object or the shiny trend, and we want to be aware of that and all the awesome things we've talked about today. But I do find that sometimes when there's a real practical way to fully fund your organization. There's a very hours aligned with dollars way to do that. And people will even say to me, I hope this doesn't offend you, but like what you're saying is like really practical. Like, yeah, it is. And so I guess I would just give advice to say, don't make it harder than it needs to be. Oftentimes we're doing the 62 things when there's actually a pretty clear, straightforward way to, in my case, the revenue.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, Monique, thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, when I think about the future, I get a little dreamy, but it's more specific to collaboration. And I hope that, and I see us trending towards more collaboration from org to org, and collaborative grant writing is something that become very interested in and kind of seeing how that works and how it impacts organizations being able to access more funds. So just starting to think about us more as a collective in the work that we do under the different issue groups that we're working under. Again, thinking about nonprofit more as like something that will eventually come to an end, or at least that is the hope. And again, just really reminding ourselves that philanthropy is supposed to be society's risk capital. So I think that, you know, your future donors and funders are only going to dream as big as you do. And whether we have to get super practical and, you know, step by step when we're talking to our donors, I think it's just good for us to always keep, like Chris said, that North Star, but like make the North Star like the game changer and talk about that often. And eventually, you know, the right and aligned people will be attracted to that. So I hope to see more collaboration overall.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, Chris, thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, I love that idea of collaboration. I mean, like trust-based giving, I really do believe is the future in some capacity. And the whole top-down and ROI approach to grant making, thinking of it in terms of like business terms, it boxes out a lot of grassroots organizations for too long, for the reasons that we talked about, right? And so like just recently, there was a racist mass shooting here in Buffalo, almost exactly a year ago to the day. And it was in a very historically disadvantaged community. And afterwards, a lot of donation money just came pouring in from all over the country. And it shined a light on how under-resourced those nonprofits are in the place that needs them the most. And a lot of that is because we expect nonprofits to be data scientists, at least in some capacity, right? But they're not a business, and it's messy and complicated, and people are complicated. And this obsession with like efficiency and things like that, I think it's just not seeing the forest for the trees. We need to help humanity on humanity's own terms, and not like Harvard Business School telling people how they need to, you know, operate in a nonprofit in a disadvantaged community. But I would say, like, as we start to transition into that trust-based giving, start collecting stories now. Like, have stories about your mission, preferably video stories that you are able to share, and use those to be able to communicate. Your story bank won't build itself. You have to actually build it over time of your mission, and because none of this is going to change, and it's only going to get harder. So you know, make sure you're prepared for the eventuality of trust-based giving becoming more prominent.
Thank you, Chris. All right, with that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists for sharing their insights today. I know if we were in an in-person setting, there would be a round of applause, so just know that I'm sharing that emotionally through the screen today. I do also want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you joined us live or you watched the recording. Really appreciate your time. Hope this panel benefited you and the amazing work that you're already doing. We are rooting for you. You've got this. You're doing great. We can't wait to see how you're going to thrive in the future. We do have a packed panel set of panels in the spring and summer, so I hope you will join us for future NXUnite sessions. Best way to keep up to date on all of those is through the NXUnite LinkedIn, the NXUnite website, or you can even find me on LinkedIn, and we can get you situated. So thank you all again for attending this session. Really appreciated all the insights from our panelists, and I hope you all have a nice rest of your day. Thank you all. Bye.
Thanks so much.